When Dr. Burnham writes, political parties are the only devices that can generate countervailing collective power on behalf of the many who are individually powerless against the relatively few who are individually or organizationally powerful, he is saying essentially the same thing that Dr. Soroff is saying when he writes, the American parties, and all others for that matter, mobilize sheer numbers against organized minorities with other political resources. We'll summarize their observation with the following proposition. Where democracy exists in modern political systems, there are also strong, vital, and competitive party systems. Burnham and Soroff are saying that democracy and party systems go together. Where we find one, we find the other. We can make this point a couple of different ways. First, we can proceed by empirical observation. If we examine this political map of the world developed by the Economist Intelligence Unit, which measures the state of democracy around the world, countries that have political systems that can objectively be described as democracies are indicated in shades of green. The darker the shade of green, the higher the country scores on their democracy index. Countries that score lowest on their democracy index are labeled authoritarian regimes and are indicated in shades of red. The darker the shade of red, the lower the country's score on the democracy index, and presumably the more authoritarian the regime is. For each country that the EIU identifies as a, quote, full democracy, and even for those that they identified as quote, flawed democracies, if we ask the question, does this country have a competitive party system, the answer in each case would be yes. For each country that they identify as an authoritarian regime, we would answer that the country either does not have a party system, has a one-party system, or has non-competitive or dysfunctional party systems. Second, we can examine the historical relationship between the emergence of democratic political systems and the emergence of modern political party systems. If we were to ask, in which country did modern mass participatory democracy first emerge, we would find that it first occurred in the United States during the period that historians refer to as the Jacksonian era, that is, during the first third or so of the 19th century. While this is not the appropriate forum to provide a detailed accounting of the changes that occurred during this period of American history, we can generally say that it was marked by changes that led to an increased role of the, quote, common man in political affairs. If we were to ask where and when did modern political parties first emerge, the answer would also be in the United States during the Jacksonian era. While political parties had existed in the United States almost from the time that the Constitution went into effect, you'll recall that the first party system featured competition between the Federalist Party and the Jeffersonian Republican Party. It was during the Jacksonian era when the second party system emerged and featured competition between the Democratic Party and the Whig Party that these democratic changes flourished. Indeed, it was the political parties that facilitated and promoted the flourishing of these notions of democracy. The emergence of democracy in Europe and other parts of the world during the latter part of the 19th century and into the 20th century was made possible by the development of competitive party systems in those countries. At the end of the 20th century, with the collapse of Eastern European communist regimes, democratization was characterized by the emergence of competitive party systems where communist party dictatorships had formerly existed. When Burnham writes, their disappearance as active intermediaries, and Soroff writes, in a more fluid politics with a large number of political organizations and millions more uncommitted voters, they are hinting at our second proposition. American political parties in recent decades have lost control over many of their traditional functions. We'll postpone an analysis of this proposition until our final segment in this series, The American Party System Today, Decline or Resurgence, at which time we'll address the effects suggested in Proposition 3. The continued decline of the American party system could produce ironic elitist consequences. According to Burnham, the effect would, quote, entail the ascendancy of the already powerful, unquote. And for Saroff, quote, the fear is that the advantage will be on the side of the well-organized minorities with other political resources, unquote. Ultimately, then, our scholars appear to be in agreement about the theoretical role of political parties in democratic political systems, the current condition of the American party system, and the potential effects of a diminished role for political parties in American democracy.